Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. I've done some videos recently going through like all the main core player races from 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and just kind of my own personal takes on how to run them as NPCs and background characters to help kind of establish a sense of normality for your players, so that they have a frame of reference for how to like play their characters if they are one of those races. If left entirely on their own, they might not portray an elf or a tiefling or whatever it is quite the way that you imagine it as the DM. So if you want them to have even a chance to do that, they need to be provided an example, and it's easier and better to do that in game than it is to just like give them like a pile of text to read and somehow absorb and remember, while also keeping track of all the various myriad things that one has to keep track of in your head in order to maintain the internal hologram of what's going on in the game in your head, without having extra stuff that you're having to try to keep track of with your memory. So I wanted to do the same thing with Orc+Bone. I feel enough people have started to like get holds a copy and have time to read it, and generally I hear positive things back from people. I haven't had anyone leave any long comments about how this is terrible or anything like that, so I good on it so far. In spite of its premise, it should be kind of play it as you want. You bought the damn thing. If you want to run it however you will. Kind of a thing. But if you want my particular take on how I view the product, it's supposed to be kind of a bit more thoughtful, a take on what an orc game should be. It's not Warhammer 40k. This is not just a ravenous horde of evil people kind of a thing. I lean back more into like a Tolkien-esque, Elder Scrolls-esque kind of mythology for orcs, where they are distinctly were an elven people who had been voluntarily modified so that they can fight early primitive humans, and whatever War of the Dawn Age kind of stuff that goes on in pretty much most fantasy settings. Like when the war was over, they weren't like reabsorbed back into elf society. They no longer fit in. They didn't fit that elitist elf aesthetic for beauty, and their immortality was kind of robbed of them. I like to do kind of a thing in this one where orcs can live for several centuries, but because of just the brutal nature of orc existence, like few of them actually filter through to be able to live that long. Most of them get killed in battle, kind of a Viking kind of thing, and because they are self-conscious of what they've been turned into, even all these millennia later. On some subconscious level, orcs still are elves on the inside, and so still have an appreciation for the sorts of pursuit of beauty kind of stuff that elves should be synonymous with, and except it's been twisted into this kind of resentful thing, and so the fact that they seek to like find some glorious way to die in battle, as opposed to linger on and on for centuries in this horrible, nasty, piggish form, I kind of feel makes sense. This is supposed to be, they're kind of moody, and because time has done for them what their own weapons and brutality could not do. Time, through attrition and just their own folly, has removed most of their main opponents from the world. Now the dwarves are gone, the elves are gone, the humans are gone, and here at the end of things, orcs find themselves the ones holding the bag. It's now their world. They're the most effective military force that can be mustered to combat the things that are still lingering over from human civilization when they appear on the scene. There should not be one common portrayal of orc society. They're in Orc+Bone. They're kind of all over the map. Some are more civilized and educated than other groups. Others are practically little more than like roving nomadic steppe plains barbarians. Although they don't go as far down as Stone Age in tech level. Orcs, in spite of their reputation, their problem isn't that they have a lack of intelligence, is that they have bad charisma, and so they're not very personable, and just because of their whole long history, and the way other races in the world have viewed them. Yeah, they are perceived as being dumb and brutal, but actually they're quite sophisticated with tool use and manufacturing and all that kind of stuff. So like, yeah, they don't go back to like Stone Age caveman kind of level. They're more like your Mongol or Turkic, Golden Horde kind of stuff, in terms of human cultures to derive some sort of base a template to kind of figure out what kind of culture they're based on. But like over time, as they've been crusading back and forth across the old remnants of the human empire, fighting vampires and other things, trying to like liberate the halflings from being used as a domesticated food source for vampires. Some of them have like picked up like a lot of stuff from like leftover human knowledge and technologies, and so the orcs are different. It depends on the individual. Depends on like what kind of subculture of orc they've emerged from. There's a lot of wiggle room in terms of for game masters to kind of figure that out on their own. But orcs aren't just nothing but like attack mode. There's that thankless hero kind of thing going on with them that I've talked about in my video I did about half orcs. Like they've been underappreciated for all this time, but here now, like, given a proper enemy to fight, and given someone to like save, the old instincts are stirred in them, and so like there's a streak of orc that is more noble in this setting than what you find in others. Also, like with the elves gone, they are all that is left of the elf in the world. Arguably, the half elves might have, on the surface, to seem like they have more of a claim on elf culture and maintaining, elf tradition, but the orcs actually were elves. They're not humans with a drop of elf blood in them, kind of a thing. And they've always, even in spite of that self-loathing that they've always had, is also built on top of the ego of being an elf. Like, they wouldn't loathe what they look like and all that kind of stuff and how brutal they've become if it wasn't in contrast to the fact that at their core they're supposed to be this like beatific being of light originally, when the world was created, kind of a thing. And that's still in them, and this setting is like kind of blowing on that last remaining ember of that. And in some of them it's taken hold, but in others they haven't changed. The memory of history, the bitterness, the resentment towards humans and dwarves and elves, even though they're gone, is still there. So not all orcs are good guys now all of a sudden. And as I've like said in other videos on the game in general, this isn't an attempt to like try to retcon them into them having been good guys the entire time in secret. It's just that there is a rationale to their attitude and some of their reputation. While like there's reasons why they developed it, it's not necessarily merited when you actually peel back the surface and see what they're really doing. Halflings are the other, to go along with the orc, are probably the other most important race in the setting in terms of NPCs, more so even than player characters. They are the damsel of the setting, so to say. They are available as players, but even with player character halflings, it's the peril that so many halflings face in the setting as being, all potentially just a food source for ancient vampires who just refuse to die. That kind of drives the at least the back. Even if you're off adventuring in the wilderness and not doing anything with vampires, because there's lots of different things to encounter and potentially do in the setting. It's there in the background churning. It is the central core of conflict for this world, and it has shaped how things have evolved since the collapse of human civilization when all of humanity disappeared. Like, not all the halflings are domesticated halflings. Some of them have been freed and have like either living alongside orcs or having gone off and created their own little new shire kind of environments. Some of them have kind of like reestablished themselves as like your classic halflings. However, their culture isn't quite so cheerful anymore. As a race, they've been heavily traumatized. by everything that happened after humanity just kind of winked out and the vampires started enslaving them. And so they're a bit more grim and fatalistic, yet they're still themselves. It might be kind of a hard thing to portray accurately because they're not quite so extreme as like the halflings in Dark Sun or anything like that. They're not turned into like cannibalistic, miniature, jungle warriors or anything like that. Even though there are wild halflings in the setting, those are just halflings that have like tried to just get as far away as civilization as possible and go out and live in the forest. They're closer to like wood elves in terms of their presentation. As opposed to what they were in Dark Sun. They're not like evil wild elves. They're done with it, Like if this is what living around the civilized races turns into, where like suddenly they're gone and now we're being like used as food. Like we don't want anything of that. We're tired of farming. We're just gonna go live off in the forest and live in tents and migrate around hunting deer and horticulturally, harvesting fruits and vegetables and all that kind of stuff. So there's those two, but even then, like all of halfling kind has been heavily demoralized by the events of recent centuries and the fact that a good portion of their race is still in that condition, because there's a good chunk of the central core of the old human imperial cities that are still kind of operating. Except the population is now like, a large population of domesticated halflings being ruled over by vampires and a couple of liches that they've made bargains with, controlling them using like, undead zombies and skeletons and stuff is basically just, like to keep everyone in line. And a population of like Hills Have Eyes mutants that are descended from the magic users that survived the winking out snap event that happened in the setting. And are themselves like some of the few actual active magic users that you'll find in the setting as well. And so like, it's an ever shrinking area of old empire where, that has some sort of unnamed vampire emperor who's declared himself emperor, probably because they're just the vampires that was in the, highest position in the imperial court at the time that everyone disappeared. And so it was the easiest for them to just kind of like slip into the throne kind of a thing. But haven't gone into any detail of that. If I ever get around to doing the Blood and Gnome book, I'll probably talk more about like what's actually going on in the Imperial Corridor and that. But it's almost, kind of like enough of a self-contained setting in and of itself that I wanted to keep it a little bit separate from Orc+Bone. Orc+Bone is more about like the restored wilderness of the world with all these ruins of this lost civilization underneath this new, wilderness forest outgrowth of wildlife, where a lot of classic monster races have kind of replaced your alpha predator positions and stuff like that. Into that world, through all that trauma, halflings have been thrust. Some of them just want to be left alone. Others want to like go on adventure and rebuild civilization, or take the fight back to the vampires and help free their own people. There's a lot of things you can do with the halflings, just as much with the orcs. I don't know. I like there being breadth of nuance of the types of people that you can see. I know that is somewhat controversial, but as we should all, as game masters and players in general, not allow the fact that one faction is trying to tell us that we have to do things a certain way, turn it into a reflex where we're just yelling back that, no, you got to do things this way. I still like to believe in a world where we have multiple options for how we want to go about, running our own little games in the way that we want to run them. And so all options should be on the table. But maybe that's just me. Anyway, I guess that's all I got to say about orcs and halflings for now, here in the Orc+Bone setting. Be sure to leave comments below about your thoughts. I'll probably do gnolls and half-elves next time. Thankfully, I don't describe a whole lot of player character races in that book, so I'm not going to have to like do a lot of these videos. But anyway, and like on Monday or something, I'll get back around to finishing off my little mini-series on Dinosaur Swamp for Rifts. Anyway, I'll say anyway again, hit buttons as always, talk about things, buy things, and stay waspinated.